Welcome back to Auskerry, a home to a vast array of wildlife, a flock of seaweed-eating sheep, and, for the last 49 years, just one family.
That's where we think
I only remember one mound.
Them. Yeah, and that's what. But there is a sort of dip, and then a.
Do you think it's possibly eroded?
No, I think it's just like Tomb of the Eagles, where that bit is where they had their bones laid out for the eagles to eat, and then that bit's where they put them to lay to rest.
Okay.
But my family's time here is a tiny chapter in the incredible history of this island. It's been a home to people for thousands of years, and today we're preparing to go on a tour of the archaeological sites across the farm.
Yeah.
And Garth is a dyke. That's why they know that's again why they know this is called Kirkgeo here. That's why they know that was a chapel ruins.
This is On to Other News, a journey back in time. It's morning in Auskerry in July 2024. There are always jobs to do on any farm. At this time of year, all the sheep here need to be sheared while the weather is this good. But today, we have something else in mind.
Whereas over the last 4 years since I've been there, we've transformed how we collect our data, how we use it, how we interrogate it.
My language.
Yeah.
Firstly, a bit of catching up over breakfast. The meal my parents always swore to us as kids is the most important of all. Mum doesn't like to do anything too strenuous until she's had at least 2 bevs, which in Auskerry means a cup of tea or coffee.
There's some ruins here. You've got the possible Viking habitation here. So I think this is the most complete map. But the mounds here.
My cousin Jamie is here at the minute. Once upon a time, he studied ancient history at university. I studied history too, and so did my partner Faye, who got a better degree mark than me, but not by much.
The field comes here because that's what they thought was the long ship, but it's an enclosure.
And that's the Viking
and
mound.
that's the mounds. But why there's mounds?
Yeah, I know. It's interesting, isn't it?
Because to me, that second mound is all part of the first one, and it's all part. Well, we'll go and look at that. And he's saying Iron Age and early habitation here.
There's another early
And that's
habitation
the
site here.
Yeah, well
That's the one that's not too far from the
that's
chapel.
the anthropoid house there. This is very badly marked. Who did this?
A brand new pair of 11.
Now that we're reacquainted with the sites, and Mum has found some wellies that will fit me after mine mysteriously went missing, we're off to walk around these incredible links with our past, on our doorstep around the island.
But as a freshwater source that is constant and never dries out, it's pretty good, isn't it?
The loch is where me and my brothers learned to row a small dinghy as kids before we were allowed to graduate to the open ocean.
The water comes from a spring up there, though, or is it just water
it's running
runoff?
all the way down from the hill.
And that's the settlement, not the burnt mound, isn't it?
No, that's the Iron Age settlement, yeah.
Yeah. Are we walking up to the Iron Age
We're
settlement
going to go
now?
around here and up to it, yeah.
Amazing.
The Iron Age settlement Jamie is referring to is evidence of humans living in a group of dwellings and associated buildings here potentially 2,500 years ago. It stands not far from a prehistoric burnt mound, which is even older, having been built anywhere between 2,000 and 4,500 years ago. It's mind-blowing to think about what their lives would have been like on this island back then.
So Iron Age would have been on top of the Bronze Age, I would imagine, settlement. I think he says that somewhere, doesn't he? And again, they call these monk houses.
Yeah.
Because it's so prominent that the fishermen used it as a mark to line up for fishing.
That's amazing.
And the same with this one. They called them monks' houses, but that's why they think these were monks living here, or hermits, but hermits with families. Otherwise, they wouldn't have persisted very long. So that's why they would call them that.
If you're wondering about the black pipe you can see here, it's the structure of a salmon farm cage. It all came ashore in a storm about 15 years ago when they were torn off the seabed near the town of Kirkwall. The debris of the cages made an enormous mess on our beaches, and so Dad came up with the idea of making the pipe into fences that will never rust, but do, unfortunately, fall over occasionally.
So we're approaching now the Iron Age mound, which is a village. It's got a lot of evidence of several houses. The strange thing about the Iron Age mound is that it has segs or irises growing up the east face of it. And they traditionally grow in marshy land, but it's never damp underfoot even in the depths of winter where they grow, which makes you think that there must be some sort of underwater spring, but it's never visible on the surface. So it was obviously a good place to make their settlement, good vantage point to see around. And they've got the freshwater lock just in front of them.
A bit sheltered around the sides, you've got a bit of hill behind.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, exactly. It's in a valley between a slight rise west and east and north and south, actually, isn't there?
It's funny though that you can't see towards the rest of the island. I guess they probably just didn't care.
Well, maybe they expected people to come from Stronsay because it was the nearest land, but so we're now at the furthest extremity of it, where the vegetation it's a smooth sward of green. There's obviously it's been worked. There are stones in amongst this, like this one right in front of us. There's not a lot of evidence of stones on the surface.
It's a big area, isn't it?
But it has to have been, this is man-made without a doubt, this area.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. It's sort of raised around there.
It would be great, this would be an amazing place to have a top-down.
That stone is pretty solid, so that looks as if it was set, not rubble. And you can see it, I mean, it undulates. This is rising up here. It isn't just up to a peak, there's sort of lower levels of rise. So clearly indicating that some structure has been put underneath. And in fact, I think if we look around the edge, we'll find more stones around there. So there's more evidence of stones now coming up here. And they're all pretty solid, indicating they're not rubble. So we come up to the top nearly, where the reeds are coming right up to the top of it. And here is an obvious circle that you're standing in here. But if I walk round it, you can see this is one circle. Then you can see another one here. But it looks like one there, another one here.
What are you talking about, entrances?
Buildings, and another one around here. There's one, you can sort of trace your steps around here. And we can look at the charts to see how solid they are. But they were clearly more substantial buildings the higher up they got.
And this damp area extends really far that way, doesn't it?
Yes. And if you go down here, you see more and more, you'd see more stones here. There's quite a lot more stones here, so there's another whole area here. And again here, there's another, looks like a circle, or possibly even a bigger circle here that goes round. And actually, Jamie, if you stand on that stone there, that could well be a complete circle here.
Yeah, another structure here.
Then over here there's stones, indicating that even as far out as here, there's something happening. Here, and all around here. And it's definitely man-made. That's not come from the sea. as it's a collection of stones that doesn't happen anywhere else nearby. And in fact, if you were putting it in modern day terms without gardens, which they wouldn't have needed, and buildings were close together so that they were all intertwined like at Skara Brae, you could actually get a lot of Skara Brae buildings into this area. Hence we think it was an Iron Age village, probably on the site of a former Bronze Age settlement. It still retains the names of monks' houses because in later years historians thought the people who lived here were more like hermits. Of course they weren't hermits in the way we think of them now because they must have had families to go on surviving for so many centuries. But because they were cut off from everyone else, the Vikings came, they were passed by, they became this kind of monastic settlement in the eyes of other people. Simon and I used to spend quite a lot of time looking over these, wondering.
This could easily be the teenager trying to move away from his parents over there, setting up here, half the island away.
We don't usually make time for walks like this. With so much to do in the warmer months, we're generally so focused on getting the farm jobs done. But we are also acutely aware that our time on Auskerry is sadly approaching its end, and we want to make sure we hand on as much knowledge of the island as possible to whoever comes next.
This is what is known as a burnt mound, and the reason it's called a burnt mound is because this crescent shape that starts here and continues all the way up over here is a mound of stones. It is made up of a mound of burnt stones and continues right the way down to here. The theory is that these burnt stones were collected and heated in a pool that was probably situated somewhere here, although this would be the building that they were using to dwell in or for whatever activity. But because the water source is here, the thought is that somewhere here would have been a collecting area for the water in the stream, and they would heat the stones and throw them in the water to heat the water. And once the water was heated, eventually the stones would become to the point where they were just going to start leaking, bits of stone because they'd become corrupted by the heat. So then they were done with, and they would then throw them out and they would form into a crescent shape. That's the theory. Now, why were they heating the water? A lot of people think it's because they were heating the water to cook things such as lobsters or meat. That's the theory that's mostly propounded at Skara Brae, I think, currently. But there's also quite a widespread thought that because it was Scandinavians who were coming here, and they're mostly found in Scotland, particularly Orkney, where the biggest Scandinavian influence in the UK is, that it was maybe where they communally, as a community, came together to bath and have a sauna. Who knows? But here is the structure that they had built. It's difficult to see at the moment how it could have been over where the heating was for the sauna, but there's definitely the stream runs down here, and that is a special sort of reed bed that is not found anywhere else because it grows in the deepest part of the water, and the water course definitely runs right down to the loch. And it starts up on the hill and takes all the water down. So that would have been where they would have collected the water.
And why is the vegetation so different where the mound is?
Because it's full of stones, so it's dry, and therefore the grass that grows here is a much better quality because it's well drained. And that grass is very, very sweet, so it's grazed all the time by the sheep. because it's the best grass on the island, some of the best grass on the island. So you always find it covered in sheep.
You can see the line all the way around where the buttercups stop.
Yes, so the buttercups must also like very well drained ground. There'd be nettles here if the sheep weren't grazing it. There's the odd one.
Yeah, there's a couple.
But they keep them down. And you can see that it's full of rubbly stones that have broken up, that are black. So they've put in big stones and they've all broken into sharp, smaller bits. And then they've thrown them away because they don't want them to shatter into lots of small bits in the water and make it dirty. So they chuck them and get new stones in. And
Gathered off the beach,
you throw them as far as you can and it forms into a crescent shape.
Does it?
Thinking about it, they'd be heated there, whatever, they would have brought them into the structure, and then it probably would have just been flung out the back door. They wouldn't have flung them as near to where they were doing the water, would they?
Maybe, yeah. It says the burnt mound dates probably to the Bronze Age, so sometime between 2000 and 800 BC.
Jamie has been reading all about Auskerry's archaeological sites on the free reference website Canmore. It collates the records made by archaeologists who've mapped Auskerry's sites on a handful of occasions since the 1920s.
The monument is of national importance because it has an inherent potential to make a significant addition to the understanding of the past, in particular prehistoric society. The good preservation of the monument and its proximity to a nearby settlement site of probable Iron Age is interesting and provides an opportunity to study the temporal and spatial relationship between the two sites and changes in society over time. The Auskerry monuments have high potential to inform us about changes in settlement, daily life and agricultural practices over several millennia. It'd help if I could talk. It's amazing thinking about it.
Self-heal, this plant here, also only grows really in grazed areas, on the island anyway, well grazed areas and the better vegetation, probably because it needs to have a bit of space to grow.
And the sheep don't eat them?
And well, I don't know, I think the sheep do eat them, but depending on how hungry they are maybe. This is eyebright, which comes in sort of white to purple, and they're like little snapdragons. I'm not sure what that red leaf is. I think it might be sorrel, but we're not seeing the stem of sorrel. Oh yes, we are. There's sorrel. That is sorrel. That with the red leaves. I thought that was sorrel.
Sorrel.
And here, look, there's a really good one of sorrel. Clover only grows in the best bits, in good fertile soil too. Some of this is Yorkshire fog, that wide-bladed leaf.
They're quite picky eaters.
Is
really,
different to some of the other grasses that are growing here. I don't know about mattering, but what's important is that every vegetation area should be made up of many different plants, which will all play their part in the ecosystem. The problem with human habitation and human farming is that we've put one species in a big area, and then the bugs that can attack it. And that's the end of that. Whereas if you've got a lot of different plants, they all help each other, and the flies will come in to pollinate one thing and eat the bugs off another. It's an ecosystem, like anything else. But you can tell each kind of vegetation will then indicate what's underneath it. So, are there stones underneath that humans left here that we can't visibly see now, but we know that the ground is being more aerated underneath and therefore it is more fertile. Hence all these flowers growing here indicate some sort of human intervention.
That is very cool.
That is really interesting.
Yeah.
Is the heather growing on relatively poor land then?
Yeah, well, heather grows on acid.
Okay.
So, and a lot of plants don't like acid, so it's only acid tolerant things that grow there. But here, definitely, the range of plants we have is either coastal heath or rough pasture, rough grazing, which is what this is. And we do get lots of other species of flowers growing. I'm not sure if that isn't... It's interesting that there's a few nettles on the mound, little clumps of them. Nettles always grow on the most fertile ground. If you buy an old property and the garden's overrun and it's full of nettles, you've got good earth. If there's no nettles and it's full of docks, not so good.
My mum's knowledge about everything from the history of the island to the botany here is amazing. It's such a pleasure to share a bit of it with you, and in its own way, this is part of maintaining and preserving that history by having a record of it on film. Next time, we decide that our reading of the sites could be much improved by an actual professional, so we invite none other than the county archaeologist of Orkney out to Auskerry. Thanks for watching this episode. I'll see you on the next one. Cheerio.